I would like to point out one person who is a great communicator, who interacted with Donald Trump in an official capacity and did extremely well. There's a great virtue in simplicity, which doesn't mean you can't address complex, difficult challenges. Probably just the worst thing, and it is very simple, is to actually start with a series of ums. And to probably do visual ums effectively with your body.
Welcome to Giraffes Don't Eat Steak, the podcast for curious marketers who zig when others zag.
Hello, Alex.
Hi, Erica. How are you doing?
I am well. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much.
Good. I am so excited that we have Michael Dodd with us today. Welcome, Michael.
It's
Welcome,
great to be here, Erica and Alex. Thank you very much for the invitation.
It feels like we've known each other forever, Michael, but actually we met during COVID, right?
We did, yes. That you can keep marketing even during pandemics. So learning point for all. Yeah.
That's true. And then you helped us with media training for a client where we actually got to meet in real life. So that was exciting.
Yeah,
real life.
Good. And they were very interesting people to work with because they weren't absolute naturals on media, but they really knew their stuff. And that's often the way where you're dealing with people who are a teensy bit scared of media, but they've still got natural talent, as we found with your people. When they get a bit of confidence and they know what the media need, it's worth pursuing.
Absolutely. So for Alex in the audience who doesn't know you, Michael, tell us about you. Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm a one-time journalist, a long-time journalist. I was a political correspondent in Canberra, Australia, and I was taught by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation how to ask blowtorch on the belly questions. And I used that a lot for Australian politicians and others. And when I became a foreign correspondent in the Northern Hemisphere here, I was also using that skill, learnable skill of how to ask blowtorch on the belly questions. And now that I'm a recovering journalist, as we call it, I help people to deal with giving great answers to tough questions, even blowtorch on the belly questions. So they can be from the media, or they might be tough questions from their clients, their prospects, government officials, or most terrifyingly for a lot of people in business, at the top of business, questions from their own people who know where the bodies are buried and still have tricky, difficult questions to ask. And so I actually use the media skills of talking to the camera, talking to the radio mic, and making it factual and entertaining, and help people who are not used to dealing with the media how they can give great answers to the tough questions they get from anywhere.
Love it.
Awesome. So how do you define a blowtorch on the belly question? In my mind, a difficult question is a question that you don't have the answer to, but maybe I'm completely incorrect.
Well, it's very close there, Alex. It's basically that question when you know you're going to be having a big conversation the next day, either a face-to-face business conversation or a media interview conversation, where you wake up in a cold sweat at 3:30 in the morning and you're saying, I hope they don't ask me that. And that is usually the blowtorch on the belly question. And sure enough, in one way or another, the media, but not just the media, see it often as their job to ask you that question. Yeah. So it's a painful question, basically, that often you may well have deep down in your subconscious a great answer to it, but that's what the training is all about. It's basically how to capitalize on your knowledge of your specialist topic and show you how to go into those tough conversations and get across, answer the questions, absolutely answer the questions, but get across positive messages and positive examples off the back of it. So however hot and scary the blowtorch on the belly question is, there often is a really good answer, And that's what the training is all about, is showing people how to find that answer and put it into the conversation when you're under pressure and when it really matters.
So if I wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, absolutely terrified of the blowtorch on the belly question that might be coming tomorrow, is it too late? Or is there a last minute technique that you can provide to people to help in that moment? Or, you know, if you're waking up at that time in the middle of the night sweating, does that mean you just haven't planned? Then you're destined for doom.
It's a bit more positive than that. I have done media training. I remember doing one in Brighton where I was training one person. They were at the top of their organization and they had a media interview that they had to do that afternoon. And we went along. I did the training in the morning and they were quite a good student. And they said, "Oh, come along and watch me in action." And I did. And sure enough, a couple of hours later, after we'd done the training, we were in the Brighton BBC and I was in the control room, just watching, but I was very pleased. And it does show that it's not so much a last minute technique, but basically what you learn, you can put into practice straight away. It's the kind of thing where you don't have to have a life study of how to give great answers to tough questions, because often you're dealing with people who are experts who know lots and lots of stuff, but it's a matter of getting them to focus on exactly what they should be digging out of their brain to put across, either in the media interview or in that tough question from a client or a would-be customer. And, if you've just learned the technique 5 minutes ago, but you've had a chance to do a bit of practice, then ta-da, you can be successful. So it's better to be prepared in advance. There are some companies which are the kind of companies where something can go terribly wrong, and it's a predictable thing. I mean, imagine you're a petrochemical company. I probably don't need to have to say too much to tell you what the people at the top of that company might wake up in a cold sweat, thinking not so much what's the tough question, they're thinking what can go wrong in the factory today or tomorrow, and what is going to be the implications. But they know lots about it, and the idea is that if something does go wrong, some companies and some people handle it really well and increase the value and the trust in their company as a result, and others collapse in a quivering heap and give really bad answers and don't do it well. So the idea is, if you are in a company where you can see a possibility for a negative scenario unfolding at some point, it's so much better to do your training in advance, and then you can sleep a lot better and probably not have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning in a cold sweat, because you know that you might be the CEO and you're trained, and ideally you've got a few people in the company who are trained, so that if and when something goes wrong, you and they are ready for it and they can put those great answers into practice.
Absolutely. And what I loved about when we worked together was, it's not only about the negative things, right? It's also about how you phrase the positive things. Thinking through, I think of some of the embarrassing scenarios, not with you, that I've been through in the past. But for example, celebrating for a new office move, for example, could give your customers the impression that you've got lots of money and actually you're overcharging us. Depending on how you phrase that. Oh, look at us, we had a lavish party. I think Jeff Bezos is in the news at the moment for his big lavish wedding, right? Like, oh, this big lavish wedding. And it's come, even though it was a beautiful celebration of love and all the rest, but just the way the media has spun it and the fact that he hasn't really said anything, it's come across quite negatives. And I think, so even how you share the positive, you need to make sure that it's on brand, on point, and that your messaging is really clear. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you typically in a typical series of media training sessions, you're basically dealing with proactive strategies for when things go right, and you do have the new office that is worth telling people about, or the new product that helps people save time and money, or whatever it does. But you also want a reactive policy for where something goes wrong. The factory does blow up, unfortunately, and you need to be ready for that negative as well. So you typically have a positive strand and are dealing with the negative strand, and they're different, but both really important. And so, I suppose the easiest way to sort of sell media training is to say, well, look, something could go wrong and you need to be ready for it. And that is true. But there is typically in any, successful company that's going to be even more successful in the future, there are success stories to talk about how, your company helped a particular client with a particular problem, and now, thanks to your product and your service, they are doing so much better. There's lots of positive things you can say, but in the heat of the moment, in the spotlight in the studio, often that whooshes out of people's brain, and they gravitate to the wrong things, which is why an essential part of the training for great answers to tough questions, media and otherwise, involves practicing, and typically practicing in a whole bunch of different kind of scenarios. A tough TV interview, maybe from the BBC Newsnight program, or a softer one on a softer, fluffier program. Both contain their problems, potentially their challenges, but if you give them lots of practice and they get to see the videos of how they react under pressure, which is a great way to learn, where they can see themselves if they're doing something crazy with their hands, trying to look relaxed and comforting, and in fact their hands are telling a different message. When they see that on the video, it's an excellent learning tool. And so by doing plenty of practice, then when it comes for that, don't ask me that question kind of moment, they can think, well, I practiced this in the training session, and ta-da, it worked there, so it'll work tomorrow when I have the meeting or when I'm in the TV studio.
And is there any merit in keeping things simple, rather than trying to always give a detailed, maybe comprehensive answer, rather than something that's simple, straightforward, to the point, straight to the point, not only just to give a clear message, but also not to clutter your mind, especially if you've got lots of different questions to answer.
Well, particularly, you don't want to clutter your own mind. That is certainly true, but you don't want to clutter the mind of the interviewer. And more important than the interviewer are all those people out there listening and watching. And so there's a great virtue in simplicity, which doesn't mean you can't address complex, difficult challenges, but often the way to deal with that is to break them down into simple bite-sized chunks, so that you're not telling them the encyclopedia version, you're telling them the simple, easy to understand version. And in particular, when you're dealing with subject matter experts, whether it's experts in marketing or experts in petrochemicals or whatever, they sometimes have a tendency to talk to people as if they are a marketing expert or a petrochemicals expert. And they mistakenly think that everyone knows as much as they do. And surprise, surprise, they don't. So really good communicators, and you can learn to be a really good communicator, they learn how to put things in simple, easy to understand language, avoiding the jargon of the industry, so that anybody can, whether they're a smart 8-year-old, or someone who's been in the industry for 35 years, they will both get some value out of the great answers that you're giving.
Michael, is there, so as we were talking about speaking to the media, and often their role is to try and ask those difficult questions. What is the worst thing someone can do when they're asked like an aggressive or hostile question?
probably just the worst thing, and it is very simple, is to actually start with a series of ums. And to probably do visual ums effectively with your body, to look really nervous, touch your face, be shaky or whatever. So there's lots of things physically that you can do, which can be improved. But if you do them first up, particularly off the back of one of those blowtorch on the belly questions, for example, imagine a situation where you've got a perfectly respectable chief executive and a perfectly respectable company, but for some reason there's some allegation which an arm of the media has picked up, which may be based on fact or may be unfactually impossible to justify, and they can get asked about, well, does your company take bribes? And the ideal answer, assuming it's true, is no. And we've got this policy which helps us make sure that we're honest and open and truthful with all the people that we deal with, and that finances never get in the way. There might be all sorts of positive things you can say, but if you actually get someone in the media spotlight, and if you're in a TV studio, there's cameras that move by themselves and lots of lights and things which can unsettle people, which is why you do the training and practice. And so they might start saying, no, we don't take bribes, or not that many anyway. And whatever it is, it's not impressive. And you've got all those ums, and I've just basically demonstrated there one of the other bad things you can do, which is repeat back negatives which are put to you. So the answer to have you taken bribes ideally is no, and these are the positive things I've got to say about that. But you don't want to be sitting there saying, no, we do not take bribes. No, in fact, we don't take bribes. We don't take a lot of bribes. No, when it comes to bribes, and so you basically, bribes there is a bad word. And if people are repeating that, it reinforces the message, because the human brain isn't very good at filtering out bad things. If they hear the word bribes and someone say, no, we don't take bribes, no, we don't take bribes, no, we don't. It's been a long time since we've taken bribes. They keep saying the word bribes. And what is the sort of key word that a typical listener or viewer will recall at the end? Oh, that company, yeah, they've got a lot to say about bribes, which is a bad word. So the trick is, however negative the questions are, you've got to basically deal with the issue, because I want people to be honest and straightforward, but to do so using your own vocabulary, using your words, and speaking in a way which addresses the facts that are required, but doesn't adopt the nasty words which professional blowtorch on the belly questioners are trained to throw in there and put into their questions. So just because the word is, the bad word is in the question, doesn't mean it has to be in your answer. And if you're talking about bribes, it's so much better to be answering in terms of, we've got great fiscal probity, and all the good things that you can say, the good positive words you can say, which is still being honest and addressing the question, but it's doing so in a much more reassuring way.
Yeah, I'm glad I had myself on mute, because I was cracking up and I don't think anyone would have been able to hear you speaking. So I was just laughing so loud. That's an excellent point, though, to not repeat back the negative question. And I think you're absolutely right. Once somebody asks the first question or opens anything, that's what's stuck in our mind. You don't want to keep reinforcing that. That's why, the first impressions always count. And then just on the question, on the point about are there any techniques to try and mitigate your image?
There are a few. One of the things is to make sure you're talking with real life examples to back up the point. So that if you're talking about, we are great in our company X, at dealing with this particular kind of problem that our customers have, it's so much better if you give a specific example that shows, talks about a particular customer with a particular problem, what your company did, and how that solved the problem. And by telling that real life story, because it's a real life true story, it's so much easier to reduce your image, a new exciting word, reduce your image by just telling something which is a story that you would have practiced in your training, and you bring it out, putting it on the table, and it's much less likely to be full of ums because it's a story you know, and ideally a story you've done a bit of practice with. It's a bit like telling a joke sometimes. I mean, your real life stories about great examples where you help customers, they don't have to be funny. But it's a bit like someone, if someone tells a joke for the first time that they haven't tried out before, it's quite possible it'll fall flat. But when they're telling a joke which they've told many times, it tends to get better over time because they know exactly what to say leading into this bit of the story and that bit of the story, and just before the punchline and delivering the punchline that gets the great laughs. Now, and you're doing a media interview, or you're giving an example of a great conversational answer in a pressure business situation, you don't have to be funny. There may be a time when that is appropriate, but the thing is that apart from the funniness, it's actually, when done well, it's like a great joke because you get that reaction that you're after at the end of it, and you go through it very smoothly with a very, very low image count.
I mean, talking about the truth in stories, you and I were discussing before we started recording, Michael, about how I asked AI to do some research for me, and it quoted these great stats. And I asked for the references to the stats, and then it said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I made all this up. You're right. I should probably have looked for real data." Should people be making up stories to prepare for this or not?
Never, never, never. Only tell exact truths. And it's a point that you and I might think is bleeding obvious, but I always make a point of it within my media training sessions after one particular experience where I clearly didn't stress that only tell exact truths enough, because we were dealing with the theory, and then we got into practice interviews, and it was for a charity, a really good charity. It was doing great work, and the person who was the best performer out of the group, there was quite a range of ages, and it was actually the oldest person in the group was the best, at least seemed that way. Watch his face. And she was like a warm, lovable, grandmotherly kind of figure. And she showed great empathy with the examples of people that she was talking about, and how, I won't be too specific because I don't want to give away the charity, but how there was a particular bad practice that people were doing, in illegal practice for that matter, but that wasn't so much the point. It was bad for their health. And this organization was helping people to be able to overcome that and to live without this dastardly thing which was causing bad health. And the grandmotherly figure was great. And my job within the training session, once we've got people going, is to actually ask a few blowtorch on the belly questions so that they're ready for them. And there were just a few things about what this lovely grandmotherly lady was saying which just didn't quite add up. And like you, Erica, with your AI saying, why didn't you tell me the truth or whatever, I was asking her a few questions, not as blatant as that, about this particular example and that particular example. And she started to get nervous, having been really supremely confident. And she said, "Do I have to tell true stories?" And I'm saying, "Yes, you do. Nothing other than exact truths." And she said, "Oh, sorry, I made it all up. I just thought that's what you wanted to hear." And so ever since then, I've absolutely stressed the point to myself, as well as those I'm training, that early on in the training session, whether it's great answers to tough questions from clients, customers, the tax department, or from TV interviews, you only tell exact truths. And it's one of the reasons why you typically, when you're dealing with a company, and a good company will have lots of positive examples they can talk about, they often don't pick the right ones first up. And so what I'm trying to do is give them practice at telling stories that they know, they're real stories to them, but ones that with a bit of practice, you get better at telling the story, still within the bounds of truth. And so when you're finishing the training session, and typically we run a few sessions so that they're getting lots and lots of practice over time and time to think about it between the session 1 and session 2, to watch how other people are doing it on TV that night if you're doing an away course or whatever. It's always good to do that. And when they practice their real life stories, they get so much better at telling them. And typically it's a lot easier to tell a factual story than one that you're making up anyway. And ideally, within the media training session, if someone does start making stuff up, which I have to say is very rare, but it has happened more than once, you've got to absolutely make the point about how dangerous it is when you are going on the record, basically. And if it's a podcast, it's there forever, out there in internet land. And if it's a TV channel, it's often going to be posted again on YouTube, and it's there long periods of time. And so it's really important that people pass the truth test during the training, after the training, and at all times. Telling exact truths is really important and a really good way to stop yourself getting into trouble.
So you officially here and now on the Giraffes Don't Eat Steak podcast demything or debunking the famous Mark Twain quote that's saying, "Do not let truth get in the way of a good story."
That is something which, unfortunately, some people at the lower end of the journalism world who are brought up on some dastardly tabloid newspapers, they actually they are brought up with that. And it's a terrible thing. I've trained a lot of journalists in my time, and we knock that out of them right at the start. It's a cliche which is occasionally practiced, but that a lot of people believe it of the worst kind of journalism. And it's really important with journalists and people who are talking to journalists to realize that journalism, at its finest, is all about truth, gathering truth, and presenting the truth. And if anyone follows that Mark Twain line, they will probably come unstuck at some point, often not very far into their career. So I definitely try and disabuse them of that.
Good advice. So you've worked extensively throughout the world in various different continents, training people and also speaking to different audiences. One thing that we always talk about, Erica and I, is that you have to know who your audience is in order to know how to communicate to them. Do you find... No, I was going to ask a question about cultural differences.
You mentioned different continents. I've done training on 6 continents. I haven't done the Antarctica so far. I'm open to invitations from penguin keepers and all that sort of thing. But one of the best jobs I had, and this is the kind of thing that I wouldn't have picked up from Sydney, but I did pick up in London, was working for a very big British government organisation, which was to do with trade. And we were training people around the world to be spreading the good word about Britain as an exporter, and to get them to be talking about the various companies that they were helping in different parts of the world. And the really good thing about this training was that I would go to every continent to actually talk about the kind of principles we're talking about now. And I would be doing mock interviews to get them used to blowtorch on the belly questions, which can come up in any country. But the really good thing about it was within the budget, they had money to pay for a local journalist to pop up wherever we were doing the training. And the local journalist would basically make it real for them. And they would be saying, well, in this part of the world, this is what the media is like. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in democratic countries, at least, in terms of the way the media work. But it was, different ways that the media tend to work in different countries that people needed to be aware of. I will give one example, which is from a not so democratic country. We went to do the training in a not so democratic part of the world, and I won't mention the country. It is a fairly controversial country. People probably won't be too shocked for this. Fortunately, the journalists that they employed wasn't from that country. They were from New Zealand, but they had a lot of experience of working in this country. And he said, well, in this country, bribery is a really big thing. And he said, the journalists expect you, if you really want them to be talking about your great product, they expect a financial reward for doing that. And now that is something that, well, it may have been true in this country, but I always advocate to people, well, I want you to be giving out great material, so that the great truthful material, so that the newspapers, the magazines, the TV stations will want to run you. Not have to get paid for it. But he made the point that bribery was particularly big in this country, and to be aware of it. And so the people on the course were armed with that knowledge, which was useful for them to know. Even though they were getting advice from me, it's best not to be paying journalists bribes in any country. It's best to rely on your own brilliance and the great material that you're giving them, so they want to run it. But yeah, things are different in different parts of the world, and it's really worth knowing that, which is why media training tends to be slightly different in different countries, where you are realizing what the media is like in that place and adapting to the particular media landscape, so that whatever your message is, you are tailoring it for the media in that country, and for the really important people, the viewers, the listeners, the readers in that country, so that you're getting your message across through the journalist, but to the actual people who really count.
Fabulous. It feels like we have to talk a little bit about some of the people who are not so good in the media. And of course, there's a king at the moment of being bad in the media, who's Trump. What are your thoughts on his style of handling these fire in the belly questions? Because he gets a lot of them, right?
He does, deservedly so. I should place on the record here, well, I have trained some politicians and some other very important people, but I have not trained Donald Trump. And that would be a terrible job to be given, to come to the White House and try and train Donald Trump. Can you imagine sitting there saying, well, listen here, Donald, I think you should do this, and I think you should do that, and you should only tell exact truths. Yeah, you can imagine that would go down really well in Donald world.
You'd be fired within 5 minutes if you told him not to.
Yeah, I think you're fired from his favourite expression from his life as a supposed TV star, and he puts that into action in the White House quite often. It seems he falls out with people very easily, and he loves firing them. He gets a kick out of that. So the thing is about Donald Trump, and I have to make this point to people, even if they're not a Trump-like personality, and that is that the cliche that all publicity is good publicity should not be believed. Yeah, there is such a thing as bad publicity, and if you actually look at Donald Trump, even though in some ways, and I emphasize the word some, not always, you might say he's an impressive communicator in some ways, in terms of grabbing attention, and in terms of talking to people who he sees as his base, the MAGA crowd, as they say, the Make America Great people. So, if you take a typical person who may be quite often a white manual worker in the American system, and when he talks about things, what he's clever at, which is a perfectly respectable thing to do, he's very good at what you call hitting a resonant chord, which is saying something in such a way that the person who's listening, in this case, a manual white worker in America, actually it resonates with them. So if you take his campaign the first time he successfully became president, yeah, he was talking about a lot more so than he does now about China taking these jobs from American workers. And he would be saying, basically, I'm angry. You should be angry. We've got to stop the Chinese taking these workers. Now, it's, you know, it's racist and to a large extent, not directly true. But the thing was that when he hits a resonant chord with people, they are thinking, Donald Trump's angry about that. Yes, I'm angry about that. Yes, he's telling what to me seems to be a truth. And so he has got positive aspects as a communicator. And I'd say do watch for them. And it's one of the reasons that, you know, being elected president of the United States legitimately, as he seems to have done twice, although he claims the one in the middle, he claims to have won that when he didn't, and that was not legitimate. But he has legitimately won twice, so it seems, and that's partly due to his good communication skills. So that's the positive. But on the negative side, I mean, he wears his ego in a way that, you know, you can see right through it. I mean, this guy is an egomaniac. He wants everyone to grovel to him and say how wonderful he is or whatever. And generally, I would be saying to people aspiring to be great communicators is don't be an egomaniac. Don't be a narcissist. You know, what I want you to be doing is thinking about your audience, thinking about the people you want to connect with. What is it you've got to say to them that they need to know that you can tell them about? And so that's something that Donald Trump does wrong. And he also thinks that any publicity is good publicity. Excuse me. So when he says outrageous things, quite often, you know, the fact checkers find that they're not true, but he gets the headlines. And you might say, well, that's successful to get the headlines. But I would say, well, take a step back and think, well, yes, sure, Donald Trump gets lots of publicity. And there are some, you know, there's quite a lot of people at various times who think Donald Trump's very good in America. But if you go to pretty much any other country and talk to the people there about what they think of Donald Trump, I think it's fair to say that in most cases, the majority of any population in Britain or in Canada or in Australia, people will be highly critical of him. And that's because of so many of the bad things he does communications-wise, where he basically does make stuff up sometimes, just like AI sometimes hallucinates. So too does Donald Trump. And in fact, I asked a brain expert in my organization, the Professional Speaking Association, and I asked the brain expert, what does she think is going on when Donald Trump is telling a story which the audience know and the fact checkers certainly find out is not true? And she said that basically when he's saying it, he does believe it. He basically has a sort of fantasy picture in his head so that he's telling it as if it is true. And I would think discerning people around the world can often spot when that's not true. Yeah, whatever it is, you know, whether it was using disinfectant to stop the problem of COVID, which in his first term he was absolutely advocating as the truth. Yeah, it didn't stand up to any medical analysis, wasn't true. But at the time he said it, the brain expert would be thinking, well, he believes it at the time. And that's a very dangerous thing when I'm training people to be great communicators. I don't want them fantasizing. I want them to practice their stuff beforehand, record it, play it back. Sometimes you play it back to other people in the same company so that the whole company can kind of fact check it. Because truth is really important if you're trying to, you know, project a great image on behalf of yourself and on behalf of your company.
I think Donald Trump is an incredibly powerful or good example of how powerful communication is, because he's so flawed in so many ways, from personally and in his personal life, in his professional life, and his political skills, etc. But like you said, on the positive side of his communication and the way he's able to tap into certain parts of people that really mean something to them, that is so powerful that it makes everybody blind, or not everybody, but a huge portion of people blind to all of the other things that are going on.
Yes, that is a truth. So sometimes I point out certain communicators who are, I think, are very effective, and if people want to model themselves on them, that's great. I could take the previous Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, currently living in America, and I think she's a fantastic communicator. And if someone wants to model themselves on Jacinda Ardern, I'd say there's a lot of good things, not on a political record, although that is probably impressive to a lot of people, but on her communications record, I would say, go ahead, or certainly, pick the best of it. With Donald Trump, I would say be extremely careful. The hitting the resonant chord thing, if you do that right, where you are talking in a way that it does help other people buy into what you're saying, providing it's truthful, that can be good. But don't take the whole package and say, I'm going to be a great communicator like Donald Trump. I think if you were the boss of a company and you took a Trumpist approach and you made as many factually dodgy claims as Donald Trump president does, I think you could get your company into all sorts of bother, legal and otherwise. So be discerning. But there are great communicators out there.
Yeah, I guess some of the most evil people in world's history have actually been the best communicators in the world, and that's partly the reason why they got to where they were and were able to stay in power for so long and gather such a support, even though they're doing awful things, purely based on their ability to communicate.
To mind, I won't mention, as I don't mention bad names, but I'll mention a fairly bad name, and that was a guy in Nazi Germany who advocated a lie told often enough becomes the truth. His name was Goebbels, and basically he practiced what he preached. And because he lived in a totalitarian world where the totalitarian world would control the truth for people on the end of it in Nazi Germany, that was a kind of factually correct statement for that environment at that time, but does not work well in a real modern democratic environment, particularly where you've got something called the internet, where there's a lot of fact checking can and does go on. You don't want to take that approach. So look out for the bad communicators. It doesn't mean that everything they're doing is wrong, but if you're going to try and copy any element of what they do, copy the good moral bits, not the bad bits. And on the topic of Donald Trump, people often, because of his massive ego and the fact that to a point, he's an effective communicator in some ways. Sometimes he gets the better of other politicians who he runs into. He doesn't use particularly nice tactics, as President Zelensky from the Ukraine would probably tell you in his quiet moments. But I would like to point out one person who is a great communicator, who interacted with Donald Trump in an official capacity and did extremely well because he planned for it, prepared for it, and practiced for it. And that is the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney. He's quite well known in Britain because he used to be the governor of the Bank of England. So he knows a lot about banking. Now, bankers are not always great communicators, but Mark Carney is. And he hasn't been Prime Minister of Canada very long, but you might have noticed that the guy over the border reckons that there's 50 states in America, and that is true, but he thinks there should be 51 states. He thinks Canada should be the 51st state. Now, Mark Carney, who in all probability, in electoral norms, was on a likely path to lose the Canadian election, he was actually able to talk in a very pro-Canada way and capitalise on Donald Trump saying that Canada should be the 51st state by saying publicly that was a terrible idea and it was not going to happen. But sure enough, once he was elected, for various reasons, he needed to go to Washington to have a chat with his neighbour. And as opposed to President Zelensky, and some other visiting politicians who haven't come out of it very well, Mark Carney came out of it extremely well on his first official meeting with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. And he knew that Donald Trump would go on with his thing about Canada should be the 51st state. He knew that. And so he planned, prepared, and practiced for it. The Canadian media had this term about they feared that he would be Zelensky, basically trapped in the Oval Office in a way that poor old President Zelensky was, and would be made a meal of. But Mark Carney had very good people around him and practiced for the fact that they knew Donald Trump would mention this 51st state thing very early on. And Mark Carney had a very good plan, which he put into action. Now, he played to Donald Trump's ego in a very clever way. Donald Trump thinks he's a fantastic deal maker. He thinks he's the world expert at the art of the deal and has written a book saying that. And in the lead up, while the world's camera crews were there, Mark Carney played on the fact that Donald Trump thinks he knows a lot about real estate. And he said something to Donald Trump about, you know, in real estate, as you know about real estate, Donald, there are some things that are not for sale. And he referenced two examples. The first example was the Oval Office, the White House, where they were, and Donald Trump said, oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, it's not, some things are so precious, they're not for sale. And then the other example, which Mark Carney got Trump talking about, because Trump has been to Buckingham Palace in London, was Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace is not for sale, however valuable it may be in deal terms. King Charles is not going to be selling it in a hurry and would probably be in all sorts of political bother if he did. And so Mark Carney got Trump to be saying, oh, yes, there are some things which are not for sale. And then Carney dropped in the conversation, Canada is one of those places that's not for sale. And Trump kind of, because he bought into this thing of some things are not for sale, basically had to buy into that. And he did for a while. And so mission accomplished as far as Mark Carney went. He basically spoke about the bad topic, the 3 o'clock in the morning question that he probably hoped wouldn't come up, but sure enough it did. But he did it in such a way that he got Donald Trump to buy in for a moment at least. But then, of course, Trump, his ego got the better of him. And then he said, oh, yes, of course. But he said, this may not last forever. It may not be not for sale forever. And Carney didn't make a massive thing of it, but he mouthed the words, never, never, never. He kept saying it. And obviously the Canadian broadcasters and others caught this and made sure that Carney wasn't backing down. So Trump was saying, never say never. And Carney's just saying, never, never, never. Basically, the Canadian media, and I think the world media, came to the conclusion that that really was the whole episode, was Carney won, Trump nil. So even with a massive narcissist, egotist, who doesn't believe in the truth, you can interact with them well if you plan it, prepare and practice it like Carney did, and you can come out as a winner. And that's what Great Answers to Tough Questions training sessions are all about.
Love that, Michael. We could actually spend the next 3 hours listening to your awesome, amazing stories, and Alex and I would love that. But I think we need to wrap up. So where can people get hold of you if they want to come and run past you, get some training, learn how to be great speakers?
Well, funny you should ask that. It's a great question, Erica. There is the www.michaeldodd.com. michaeldoddcommunications.com website, where there's lots of information about the various ways you can become a better communicator through Michael Dodd training. So that's out there. I'm very open to emails. If anyone wants to send me an email and say, can we line up a chat about media training or training about giving great answers to tough questions. So that's Michael, Michael, often misspelled, Michael at michaeldoddcommunications.com. Send me an email. You will also find me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to link in with people. If you've heard the podcast and you think, oh, it'd be great to be connected with Michael Dodd, just send me a LinkedIn invitation with a little note so that you can reference Giraffes Don't Eat Steak podcast that you heard there and you'd like to be connected. Then I could be won over by that. So great to be in touch. Communication is a learnable skill and it's great fun teaching it.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. It's been really awesome. Alex, any last words?
No, just thank you very much. And I think my biggest takeaway is don't repeat the negative words being used in an aggressive or aggressive question towards you in the media. I think that was really good. And also, I think you're the smartest guest we've ever had with your jacket. So thank you very much.
Right, there we are. Yeah, this is my summer jacket. Funnily enough, I got it dry cleaned especially for the occasion, so I'm glad you noticed that. I'll tell the dry cleaner he's done a great job of pressing it. What a great podcast this is. You could probably do with a bit of a Giraffes Don't Eat Steak podcast. We all could. We all need to know about marketing.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I will see you again soon.
Thanks for listening to Giraffes Don't Eat Steak, where curious marketers zig when others zag. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with someone who loves great marketing conversations. And don't forget to follow, review, or drop us a note. We love hearing from fellow curious minds. And if your own marketing's feeling a bit tangled, check out our Marketing Power Hour. It's a focused one-to-one session designed to help you get clarity and momentum. Just go to themarketingdetectives.com and book your slot. Until next time, keep zigging.